Okay, so in this video, we're going to look at economic growth and we're going to look at living standards. And economic growth is usually the first thing that we consider in macroeconomics. Macroeconomics is, in essence, if you want to think about what we're going to be studying, it's the whole economy. So it's not individual markets, that's microeconomics. And the whole economy using the resources that it's got. It's got land and labor, capital, machinery, vans, coal, iron ore, etc., to produce goods and services. That's it. You know, the macroeconomy is about the total amount of goods and services that the economy produces for the population of the economy. And in doing so, it employs their workers. So workers get employed and then they get a wage and then they can buy the goods and services. And the whole idea really here is that in terms of macroeconomics, we're producing goods and services, that's the output of the economy, and then the ability to buy those goods and services, which therefore makes the population happy. It increases their standard of living, but we'll question that as we go through. So economic growth is measured by an increase in real GDP. And so we've got to ask ourselves now, well, what do we mean by real GDP? And the idea is behind real GDP is it's the volume of goods and services. It's the physical number of goods and services that can be produced within the economy, which therefore can, be bought by people and makes them happy, increases their living standards. I'm using the word happy because the government are using a happiness index at the moment. And what the government try to do is ensure that over time, this real GDP, that's economic growth, keeps rising, keeps inflation low, unemployment low, and make sure that our exports and imports are about in balance with the rest of the world. Those are the objectives of the government. We'll look at those in further detail in other videos. Living standards is a slightly nebulous term in economics. It can mean lots of different things. So there's a basic measure. It measures what we call the material welfare of a country, the well-being, and as a basic measure, it takes that real GDP, economic growth, if you like, the increase of that is the economic growth, but it then divides it by the head of population. So it's the real GDP, the number of goods divided by the population. But we do consider there's other factors that we need to think about, which should be included in our living standards, but it's really difficult to get data for this. It could be the level of wealth, income, the quality and availability of employment, not just that there's more jobs, it's what about the quality of those jobs at the moment. You could be thinking about the types of jobs that have been created in the economy, and the Labour Party have supported the idea that we should ban 0-hour contracts. All part of the quality of employment. Should be talking about equality amongst the population. It's no good if we produce the goods and then just one or two of us get it. Okay, the affordability of housing, healthcare, education. Some include life expectancy and disease control. Big one is environmental quality and freedoms that we get in the economy. So we're going to look at those in a lot more detail. This is just giving you a broad overview at the moment to say, well, living standards, we've got to start with real GDP per head of population. So the question is, how do we get there? How do we start with real GDP? How do we get to measure that? And I like to think of it as a big balloon with two holes in it, and there's two forces, if you like, on the size of our economy. So this is the size of GDP, this is the value of GDP, and this is what the data that gets collected by the government. So they collect from the firms within the economy, etc., the value of the output. They don't collect the volume of output, they collect the value of output. So what do we do? Well, what we need to do as economists is to turn that into real data to take into account the effects of inflation, and the value is made up of the quantity, the number of goods and services, multiplied by the price level of those goods and services. So in other words, this value, this size of this balloon, the size of our economy, is affected by the volume of goods, the physical number of goods and services, times the price level. Try not to use the quantity in your macroeconomics, okay? I put it here, try not to do that. It is better to actually use the volume rather than the quantity, okay? All right, so why is that important? Well, think about it. If you bought £100 worth of goods, let's say bars of chocolate, this week and next week you managed to buy £150 worth value, are you better off? Well, if that £100 was 50 bars at £2 each, and then the following week they'd gone up to £3 each, and you said, oh, I've spent £150, do you feel better off? No, you don't. You've still got the same number of bars of chocolate. You've still got the same volume of bars of chocolates, as it were. So the only time you would be better off is if the price of the chocolate stayed the same and you were able, therefore, to buy 75 bars of chocolate. Now I'm happy. I've got more volume, or possibly somewhere in between. So the price might have gone up to 250, but I was able to buy 60 bars. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea that it's really important to distinguish between the value and the volume. And the same could be said of the economy, where the volume of goods gets multiplied by the price level to give us the value. So value of output is also known as nominal GDP, sometimes money GDP, or GDP at a certain year, here 2022, prices. So that's the value of output in this case, the year 2022. Whereas when you're looking for the volume of GDP, we call it real GDP, and that is the phrase GDP at a constant price. In other words, we've managed to take out of those figures the price increase that has happened in that time period. So as economists, we convert the data collected on the value, turn it into volume. How do we do that? Well, the data is collected as a value. So in these years here, we've collected data, let's say, the value of GDP, there it is, it's going up. The price index is also going up. So this is a measure of inflation. And so what we have to do is we have to deflate it. It's called the deflator. So think of that balloon example again. The balloon has gone up, the size of the balloon has expanded because the volume has gone up and the price has gone up. And I want to deflate that, make it slightly smaller by taking out the effect of that price increase. So what you do is you use the, let's call it a base year here, the first year we're talking about in 2018. We're comparing everything to this, and we would say, let's look at that increase. 500 went up to 525 billion in value terms. But in terms of real, we simply take the value, the nominal GDP, multiply it by the price index in that first year, and then divide by the price index. In other words, that 100 over 103 is going to give you a number less than 1, and therefore that's going to bring that down a bit. And we'll see the answers. This is going to give you an answer of 509.7. So the value might have gone up from there to there, but the real GDP has only gone up from 500 to 509 because most of that was the price increase. Okay, same here. You take the 590 in 2020. You say, I want to know what real GDP is. You take the 590, you take the value, multiply it by 100, divide by 105. This year, 100 divided by 108. So you're always deflating the figures in that way. And the formula for it really is given here. Let me go through the slide. The formula is real GDP is the nominal GDP times the price index in that first, sometimes we call it the base year, price divided by the price index in the current year. Okay, Another way of doing it is to recognize that, and this is sort of correct mathematically, that the change in the value is made up of the percentage change in the volume and the percentage change in the price level. So if the volume rose by 3, price by 2, so you pumped up your balloon by 3% through one hole, 2% through the other hole, then there's a 5% increase in the value. And you simply can add those two figures together and it'll be roughly correct. So how do we get to real GDP per head? We start with nominal, convert it to real by the means I've just said, and then we divide that real by the number of the population. And that gives us the physical number of goods and services that are available per head of population. And if that is going up, that's the starting point to say that our living standards are going up. So hopefully that gives you a good introduction.